Have you ever imagined that your very first kiss could change your life forever? Today, I'm going to tell you the incredible true story of a young woman named Sophia, who gave her first kiss to a man she believed was just a charming stranger, unaware that he was a powerful Mafia boss. It's a tale of love born from coincidence, of dangerous secrets and heartfelt passion, and of how one innocent kiss set in motion a chain of events that would bind two souls together against all odds. It all began on a warm summer night in Rome, the Eternal City, where ancient cobblestone streets wind through bustling piazzas, and the golden glow of street lamps lends a touch of magic to the air. Sophia had ventured out that evening with her closest friend, after much persuasion, to enjoy a rare night off from her responsibilities. She was young and principled, known for her guarded heart and sensible demeanor. Devoted to her studies and her family, Sophia rarely allowed herself the luxury of late nights out. But that night, under the Roman sky, with laughter and music spilling out of lively cafes, even Sophia felt the gentle pull of adventure. The two friends wandered through Trastevere, a charming neighborhood known for its vine-draped balconies, bohemian spirit, and lively nightlife. The air was rich with the scent of tomato sauce and basil from nearby trattorias, and strains of a distant accordion mixed with the murmur of conversation. As they strolled along the narrow alleyway, uneven cobblestones underfoot, Sophia's friend looped an arm through hers and teased, "Tonight's the night we find you a little romance, Sophia. Even if just a harmless flirt. You deserve some excitement." Sophia rolled her eyes but smiled. "I doubt I'll find romance in one night," she retorted. Her friend laughed, giving her a playful nudge. "Who said anything about true romance?" she teased. "Even just finally getting a kiss would do you good. You need some practice, ragazza." Sophia felt her cheeks warm and swatted her friend's arm lightly. "Oh, stop it," she mumbled, half embarrassed and half amused. "You make me sound hopeless." "Not hopeless, just picky. And a little too cautious," her friend sing-songed, flashing a grin. "Tonight, let's change that." Sophia merely shook her head, her smile lingering. She wore a simple blue dress that swayed around her knees and flat sandals, practical, as always, for the old stone streets. Her dark hair was swept back into a low ponytail, a few wisps escaping to frame a face that was naturally pretty, if usually serious. "I'm not looking for romance," she insisted softly, her Italian accent lilting in her English words. "I only came because you wouldn't stop begging." Her friend laughed and pulled her toward a popular bar tucked between a gelato shop and an old bookstore. Inside, the atmosphere was warm and inviting. Low golden light, walls lined with vintage film posters, and a haze of laughter and clinking glasses. A cheerful Italian pop song played in the background. Patrons clustered around the counter ordering Aperol spritzes and Negronis, while others squeezed around small tables, deep in animated conversation. Sophia felt a flutter of nerves stepping into the crowd. This scene was out of her comfort zone. They found a tiny high table near the back. Sophia's friend immediately ordered 2 cocktails, but Sophia opted for a peach Italian soda instead. She wanted to keep her wits about her. As her friend chatted with a group of travelers in rapid Italian, Sophia let her gaze wander over the room. She observed couples leaning close to whisper, a group of young men gesturing wildly in a debate, and a few tourists attempting to converse with the bartender using enthusiastic hand gestures. Despite her initial reluctance, Sophia felt herself relaxing just a little. The energy was contagious. After a while, her friend excused herself to the restroom, leaving Sophia alone at the table. Sophia sipped her soda and savored the sweet, fizzy taste mingling with the faint bitterness of orange peel. She closed her eyes for a moment, enjoying the rarity of a night with no looming responsibilities. No textbooks waiting at home, no early shift to prepare for. Maybe her friend was right. Maybe she did need to let herself live a little. "Ciao, Bella," a voice interrupted her thoughts. Sophia opened her eyes to find a stranger standing a bit too close to her table. He was around her age, maybe slightly older, dressed in a sharp shirt unbuttoned one button too low, and exuding a confidence that immediately put her on edge. He smiled in a way he probably imagined was irresistible. "All alone, beautiful? Can I get you a real drink?" he asked in Italian, nodding at her near-empty glass. Sophia's guard instantly went up. She offered a polite, tight smile. "No, thank you," she replied in Italian, keeping her voice cool but courteous. She hoped he would take the hint and move on. Instead, the man pulled out her friend's chair and sat down uninvited. "I insist," he said, waving over a waiter without waiting for her agreement. He leaned toward Sophia, eyes roaming in a way that made her skin crawl. "A pretty girl like you shouldn't be alone. Where's your boyfriend?" "I'm fine, really," Sophia said, trying to sound firm. Her heart began to thud with unease. Where was her friend? The bar suddenly felt too crowded, the air stifling. She subtly pushed her chair back, putting a few more inches between herself and the unwanted stranger. "My friend will be back any moment." The man shrugged as if he hadn't heard her at all. He reached out, brazenly brushing a stray lock of hair off Sophia's shoulder. She froze, a spike of fear and anger shooting through her. "Don't touch me," she said sharply, pulling away. His smile vanished, replaced by an annoyed sneer. "Feisty, I like that," he said, ignoring her protest. Sophia's pulse pounded in her ears. She glanced toward the restrooms anxiously, still no sign of her friend. She cursed herself for not pushing harder when he first sat down. Most men would have backed off at her clear rejection, but this one was persistent, and she was quickly moving from nervous to frightened. "I said I'm not interested. Please, leave me alone." Sophia tried again, voice louder this time. A couple of nearby patrons glanced over, sensing the tension, but no one intervened. Suddenly, before Sophia could cry out or pull away, a strong arm slipped around her shoulders from behind, gently but firmly drawing her back from her harasser's reach. In the same heartbeat, she felt herself pressed against the solid warmth of a broad chest, and a deep, steady voice spoke just above her ear. "There you are, amore mio," the voice purred in a tone of casual intimacy. "Me dispiece for making you wait." Before Sophia could even turn to see who had come to her rescue, she felt the stranger's other hand cup the side of her face with surprising gentleness. And suddenly, oh. His lips were on hers. Her mind went blank. He was kissing her, right there in the middle of the crowded bar, in front of everyone. A complete stranger's mouth was pressed to hers, and for a split second Sophia forgot how to breathe. It was her first kiss, her first ever, and it was nothing at all like the sweet, patient experience she'd quietly daydreamed about. It was urgent and unexpected, born of desperation and boldness. Yet, as the initial shock flared through her, Sophia felt something else too, a hot, fluttering current that shot through her veins and rooted her to the spot. His lips were warm and firm against hers, and he smelled of clean soap and a hint of spice. There was strength in the arm holding her securely, but also a tender reassurance in the way his hand cradled her cheek. The kiss lasted only a heartbeat or two, just a brush of heat and pressure, before he pulled back slightly, his face still only inches from hers. Sophia's eyes were wide, her pulse roaring in her ears. For a moment, she could only stare up at the stranger who had so audaciously stolen her first kiss. She caught the impression of a strong jawline, intense dark eyes, and the faint shadow of stubble. Her lips tingled from the contact, parted in astonishment. She lifted a trembling hand to them, as if to confirm that the startling moment had been real. "What the drunk man blustered, looking between Sophia and the tall newcomer in disbelief and anger. The stranger slowly turned his head to confront Sophia's harasser, his arm still protectively around her. "Can I help you?" he asked coolly, as though the other man had simply interrupted a private moment between lovers. There was a deadly calm in his voice, a warning that cut through the stunned silence that had fallen around their little corner of the bar. Sophia's unwanted suitor scowled, face flushed red with humiliation and drink. "Who the hell are you?" he spat. His eyes flicked to the arm around Sophia and the proprietary way the stranger stood half in front of her. Her boyfriend or something? Without missing a beat, the dark-haired stranger responded, "Yes, so you'd better leave, adesso." Now for a second, the drunk seemed to consider trying to fight. He glared at Sophia, as if she had orchestrated this embarrassment. "You should have just said you had a man," he growled at her, indignation slurring his words. "She did, and you didn't listen," the stranger answered for her, his tone dropping further. His eyes bore into the man with an intensity that made even Sophia, who the anger wasn't directed at, feel a chill. The lady said no. "I suggest you walk away, now." The harasser bristled. "Or what?" he challenged, stepping forward as if to provoke a confrontation. In a flash, the tall stranger shifted, positioning Sophia fully behind him. He seized the other man's incoming arm in a blur of motion. Sophia gasped as she watched the stranger twist the drunk's wrist with effortless precision. Not enough to break it, just enough to send pain shooting up the man's arm and bring him swiftly to his knees with a yelp. "Or you won't be walking at all," the stranger finished in a low murmur meant only for the man's ears. Though softly spoken, the menace in that promise was unmistakable. The color drained from the drunk's face as the realization hit him that he had picked entirely the wrong person to harass. He grimaced, nodding hastily. All right, basta. I'm leaving!" he barked, more out of fear than courage. The tall man released the drunk's wrist and took a deliberate step back, allowing him space to scramble to his feet. The defeated aggressor nursed his arm and glared at Sophia one last time with a mix of resentment and wounded pride. "Stupid tease. Not worth it anyway," he muttered under his breath. The stranger tensed at those words, a flash of anger crossing his face. He started forward as if to do more, but Sophia, recovering her wits, quickly touched his arm and whispered, "Lascia stare." "Let it go." Her gentle plea halted him. With a final withering glance at both of them, the drunk man staggered off, melting back into the crowd and out the door. The buzz of conversation slowly resumed around them, the brief drama already becoming an anecdote for onlookers to quietly discuss. Sophia stood there, chest heaving as she tried to process what had just transpired. The danger was gone, but her heart was still pounding wildly. Now, in the aftermath, it was due less to fear and more to the shocking realization that she had just had her first kiss. And it had happened here, like this, with a stranger who still had his arm loosely wrapped around her. As if suddenly aware of that fact, the stranger let his arm slip away from her shoulders. He turned to face her, concern replacing the earlier fury in his expression. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle and rich, with a polite formality that contrasted with the intimacy of what he'd just done. Sophia exhaled shakily, a breath she felt she'd been holding for far too long. Her fingers hovered at her lips, which still felt warm. She stared up at him, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. Her hands were trembling as the adrenaline coursing through her finally began to ebb. I think so," she managed to say, her voice unsteady. "I thank you. Grazie, veramente." Her eyes searched his, filled with gratitude, confusion, and no small amount of astonishment. You kissed me," she added in a breathy whisper, still incredulous about the unexpected, daring tactic he'd used. A look of contrition crossed the man's face. "Forgive me," he said at once, his brow creasing. "I'm sorry if I overstepped. I thought it might be the quickest way to convince him you weren't alone. I didn't mean to offend you." He ran a hand through his dark hair, looking genuinely concerned that he might have upset her. Sophia quickly shook her head. "No, I mean, yes, it surprised me, but I'm not offended. You were improvising, and it worked." A shy, shaky laugh escaped her lips as the initial shock finally gave way to relief. He definitely got the message. A hint of a relieved smile tugged at the corners of the stranger's mouth. "I'm glad." He hesitated, then said more softly, "Thank you for understanding." Now that the chaos had passed, the two of them were suddenly just a man and a woman standing very close together amid the dim lights and murmuring crowd, the air between them charged with an awkward yet strangely pleasant tension. Sophia realized people were still casting glances their way, some curious, some amused. Heat flooded her face again as she wondered what they must think of her, being kissed so passionately by someone she clearly hadn't even known a minute before. This whole situation felt surreal. She straightened, trying to regain her composure. "I'm Sophia," she offered, almost blurted, as if needing to reassert some normalcy by way of a proper introduction. Her voice was still a little shaky, but she managed a small, genuine smile. "Sophia Ferretti." The stranger's eyes seemed to brighten at her smile, and he gave a polite dip of his head. "Lorenzo," he replied. "Lorenzo De Luca." He said his name as if he were used to it being recognized, pausing a beat, but Sophia was too dazed to make any connection, and it meant nothing to her, beyond being the name of the man who had just turned her world upside down in the span of a few minutes. "Sophia," Lorenzo repeated softly, as if testing how her name felt on his tongue. The way he said it, with that gentle Italian emphasis, sent a small thrill through her. At last, Sophia became aware that her friend was still nowhere in sight, and that she and Lorenzo were standing alone by her tiny table. The bartender was eyeing them with a raised eyebrow, perhaps to check if everything was all right. Sophia felt a sudden urge to move, to get some fresh air and clear her head from the haze of adrenaline and the lingering sensation of Lorenzo's lips. "Would you, maybe step outside with me for a moment?" she asked, her voice timid but earnest. "I just need a breath of fresh air." "Of course," Lorenzo said immediately. He gently gestured for her to lead the way, keeping a courteous distance now, as if careful not to invade her space any further after his bold move earlier. Sophia grabbed her small purse with unsteady hands, and together they navigated through the crowded bar toward the exit. Her legs felt a bit like jelly, but she was grateful that the night air was only a few steps away. They emerged from the stuffy warmth of the bar onto the narrow street, and the night air was a relief, cool against Sophia's flushed skin. Outside, Trastevere was alive with its usual nocturnal energy. Groups of friends laughing over late dinners at sidewalk tables, a street musician plucking the strings of a guitar under a glowing lantern, and the distant roar of a motorcycle echoing down the lane. Overhead, garlands of lights were strung between buildings, twinkling like stars that had fallen into the city. Sophia inhaled deeply, letting the myriad scents of the evening fill her lungs. Rich tomato and olive oil from a nearby pizzeria, the sweetness of night-blooming jasmine climbing a doorway, the faint hint of tobacco from a man lighting a cigar around the corner. Her racing heart gradually began to calm in the embrace of the familiar city night. "Better?" Lorenzo asked, standing beside her. "Yes, much better," Sophia replied, meeting his eyes. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come when you did." "You don't need to thank me," he said. "Anyone should have done the same. I'm just sorry you had to deal with that." There was genuine regret in his tone, as if he personally felt responsible for the other man's bad behavior. They stood there for a moment, a comfortable silence falling between them as the night unfolded around them. Sophia found herself studying Lorenzo discreetly. He truly was handsome, but it wasn't just his looks. There was something in his demeanor, a quiet strength and old-world courteousness that she was drawn to. It was unusual. Most guys around her age were loud, brash, often immature. Lorenzo, on the other hand, carried himself with a composed confidence, like a man who knew exactly who he was and didn't need to prove anything to anyone. As they waited, they made light conversation. Lorenzo asked if she lived in Rome, and she explained that she had grown up in the city and was currently in her final year of university. She spoke about her love of literature and history, albeit a bit shyly, not wanting to bore him. To her surprise, he didn't seem bored at all. In fact, his eyes lit up when she mentioned history. "I spent a few years in Florence studying history," Lorenzo shared. "There's nothing quite like immersing yourself in the past, especially in a country as rich with heritage as ours." "You studied in Florence?" Sophia asked, intrigued despite herself. She had assumed from his polished appearance that he was perhaps a working professional or businessman, not a student. "Do you still live there?" "No, I'm based in Rome now," he said. "I travel sometimes for work, but Rome is home. I run a family business here in the city." At the mention of family business, Sophia nodded politely. Many of her friends' families ran businesses. It was common. "What kind of business?" she asked conversationally. Lorenzo gave a small, cautious smile. "Import-export mostly, and some real estate investments," he replied. It sounded a bit rehearsed, as if he'd given that answer many times. "It keeps me busy." "I can imagine," Sophia said. She didn't press further. Business talk wasn't that interesting to her, and she assumed it might be mundane for him to discuss work on a night out. Instead, she found herself sharing a bit about her own life. She told him about living with her mother and helping out at her mother's small bookshop near Piazza Navona when she wasn't in class. She even mentioned her late father, who had been a police officer, though she quickly glossed over that, not wanting to darken the mood with the story of how he'd died on duty when she was 14. But Lorenzo didn't gloss over it. His expression softened with empathy. "Your father was a policeman? He must have been a brave man." "He was," Sophia said quietly, a familiar pang in her chest. "He loved this city, and he believed in protecting people. He died doing that." She offered a faint smile, though the memory was painful. "It's part of why I'm..." Careful, I guess. Seeing what my mom went through after we lost him, I never want to be the reason someone I love experiences that kind of pain. I promised myself I'd avoid situations that could lead to trouble. Lorenzo regarded her quietly for a moment. There's nothing wrong with being careful, he said gently. Wanting to protect yourself and the people you love. That's very understandable. He paused, then added softly, for what it's worth, I think your father would be proud of you. Sophia looked up at him, warmth spreading in her chest at his words. There was sincerity in his tone that touched her. Thank you, she murmured. Before she could say more, a voice called out her name from down the street. Sophia, there you are! It was her friend, hurrying toward them with a look of concern. Me despias, I'm sorry. The friend apologized breathlessly when she reached Sophia's side. The line for the restroom was so long, and then I thought I saw you leave. Are you okay? You look shaken. Sophia managed a reassuring smile. I'm okay now, but you missed a bit of excitement. She quickly, and somewhat delicately, summarized what had happened. Her friend's eyes widened in shock and then darted to Lorenzo with gratitude. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for helping her, she gushed, switching to English. She gave Lorenzo an appreciative once-over, and then shot Sophia a sly look and grin that wordlessly said, and he's handsome too. Sophia's cheeks flushed. She cleared her throat, suddenly shy now that her friend was here to witness this. It was as if reality came rushing back. She'd just been through an ordeal, and then swept into an extraordinary moment with this gallant stranger. A moment she was reluctant to see end. Lorenzo dipped his head modestly at the thanks. I'm glad I was able to help. I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. He then checked the silver watch on his wrist and gave Sophia an earnest look. It's getting late. I don't want to intrude on the rest of your evening, but would you allow me to arrange for you both to get home safely? Perhaps I could call you a cab. Or if you don't mind, I can drive you. I have a car just a few streets over. The friend immediately nodded enthusiastically, but Sophia hesitated. Part of her, ever cautious, insisted that she shouldn't impose on him or spend more time than necessary with a stranger, no matter how kind. But another part of her, the part still glowing from his rescue and the thrill of that unexpected kiss, found herself not wanting to say goodbye just yet. The bus is an option, but it's a long wait at this hour, the friend chimed in practically. A ride would be great if it's not too much trouble. It's no trouble at all, Lorenzo assured with a polite smile. Please, I insist. They set off together through the winding streets of Trastevere, leaving behind the bar's noise. As they walked, Lorenzo kept a respectful distance, though Sophia noticed he stayed slightly closer to her side, as if still ready to protect her. Her friend did most of the talking, bubbly with post-ordeal adrenaline, chattering about a mishap at work earlier that day. Lorenzo listened attentively, even chuckling at the right moments. Occasionally, Sophia caught him glancing her way with a gentle smile, and each time, her heart fluttered. In about 5 minutes, they reached a quieter side street where a sleek black car was parked under a street lamp. It was an expensive German sedan that looked out of place in this old quarter. Lorenzo unlocked it with a click and opened the passenger doors for the two women. Sophia slid into the cool leather back seat, and her friend followed. Lorenzo took the driver's seat and, after a smooth ignition, guided the car through Rome's late-night streets. Sophia's friend kept up friendly conversation, occasionally throwing in a light joke about the evening's knight in shining armor. Sophia mostly listened, still trying to process the night's events. She found herself stealing glances at Lorenzo's silhouette in the driver's seat, the confident way he handled the car, the faint smile that would touch his lips when her friend said something funny. Every so often his eyes flicked to the rear-view mirror, meeting Sophia's for a brief, electrifying second. Crossing the Tiber River on one of the ancient bridges, they headed toward the neighborhood where Sophia and her friend lived. In what felt like no time, Lorenzo was pulling up in front of the building where both women had apartments. He parked and turned to look at them. Here we are. Thank you so much, Lorenzo, Sophia's friend chimed, already opening the door on her side. You're a lifesaver, truly. It was my pleasure, Lorenzo responded politely. Sophia's friend took that moment to make a tactful exit. She stepped out onto the sidewalk, and then leaned back down to poke her head in Sophia's door. "I just remembered I promised my roommate I'd check on her tonight," she lied breezily, not even attempting to be convincing. "You'll be okay getting upstairs, Sophia?" She shot her friend a quick wink. Sophia blinked in surprise at the sudden maneuver. "Oh, yes. I'll be fine." "Great, good night." And with that, her friend flashed an impish grin and shut the door, leaving Sophia alone in the car with Lorenzo. The car suddenly felt smaller. Sophia's heart did a tiny flip as she realized her friend had engineered this moment alone. In the quiet that followed, she fumbled for words. Sorry about that. She can be abrupt." Lorenzo chuckled, the sound low and reassuring in the darkness of the car. "No need to apologize. I'm just glad you have someone looking out for you." He shifted slightly in his seat so he could face her. The only light came from the soft glow of the dashboard and a distant street lamp, but it was enough for Sophia to see the tender concern in his amber brown eyes. Her pulse picked up again. "Are you sure you're all right after everything?" he asked quietly. "I hate that you had to go through such an ordeal." Sophia nodded. "I was really shaken at first, but I'll be okay." She gave a faint, self-conscious laugh. "To be honest, I'm more stunned by how the night turned out." A small smile played on his lips. "It was quite an evening." She bit her lip, warmth flooding her cheeks as an image of that moment in the bar, his lips on hers, flashed through her mind. Gathering her courage, she said softly, "I've never had anything like that happen before." Lorenzo's expression turned gentle, a touch rueful. "I hope I didn't scare you too much." "You did startle me," Sophia admitted, and then she smiled, a genuine, thankful smile. "But I'm very grateful you were there, and I'm not sorry it happened." A spark of something, relief, joy, lit in his eyes. Silence fell again, but it felt warm, expectant. Lorenzo inhaled as if steeling himself, then spoke. "Would it be too forward of me to ask if I could see you again? Perhaps under more pleasant circumstances. Maybe I could take you out to dinner or a coffee sometime. I'd really like to get to know you better." Sophia's heart soared and lodged in her throat simultaneously. Part of her, the cautious, rational part, noted that she had only just met this man. But another part, the part still feeling the tingle of that kiss and the safety of his presence, was elated. She found herself smiling shyly. I think I'd like that." His face lit up with an unmistakable happiness. "Wonderful." He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and produced a sleek black business card and a pen. Scribbling quickly on the back, he handed it to her. "This is my personal number," he said. The front of the card read DeLuca Holdings and his name, but he glossed over that. "Call or message me whenever you like." Sophia took the card carefully between her fingers, as if it might vanish if she didn't hold tight. "I will," she promised softly. Neither of them moved for a moment. It was that delicious, precarious instant at the edge of something new. Finally, Sophia mustered, "Good night, Lorenzo, and thank you for everything." "Good night, Sophia," he replied, her name a caress. "Dormi ben, sleep well." She slipped out of the car. Before closing the door, she bent down one last time to meet his eyes. So much swirled in her mind that she wanted to say, how she'd never forget his kindness, how she felt oddly as if she'd known him longer than a few hours, but she settled on a simple, heartfelt buonanotte. "Buonanotte," he echoed with a smile that made her stomach flutter. Sophia shut the door gently. She stood on the curb and watched as Lorenzo's car pulled away, the headlights cutting through the quiet street. Only when the red taillights disappeared around a corner did she finally turn toward her apartment building, her heart fluttering in her chest like a bird that had just learned to fly. As Sophia climbed the stairs to her flat that night, she touched her fingers to her lips, the reality of the evening washing over her. So much had happened in such a short span. Her first real brush with the ugliness her father had always warned her about, followed by her first encounter with a man who embodied something very different. Protectiveness, kindness, and an air of mystery that both intrigued and unsettled her in equal measure. And amidst everything, in the chaos and relief, Sophia realized that Lorenzo had done more than just rescue her. He had come between her and danger in the most extraordinary way, by kissing her. Her first kiss, stolen in a moment of chaos, had left a lingering warmth on her lips. Sophia's cheeks warmed at the memory, her fingers grazing her mouth as she recalled how unexpectedly right it had felt to be in his arms for those fleeting seconds. She had never imagined her first kiss would happen like this, given freely to a stranger under the garlands of bar lights, as an act of protection rather than romance. Yet her heart fluttered at the thought of it. "Get a grip," she gently chided herself. This wasn't a fairy tale. Things like this didn't happen in real life, did they? Perhaps not. And yet, as she got ready for bed, Sophia realized she didn't regret how the night had turned out. Fate, or whatever it was, had intervened in the form of a mysterious, gallant man who made her feel safe and seen in a way she'd never felt before. Clutching her pillow, she placed the elegant black card with Lorenzo's number on her nightstand, the silver lettering catching a glint of moonlight. She smiled to herself, a tiny hopeful smile, as she finally closed her eyes. Her world had shifted. She could feel it. Unbeknownst to Sophia, this night was only the beginning. The man who had entered her life so dramatically was far more than a charming stranger. Lorenzo De Luca was a man with dangerous secrets of his own, secrets that would soon test the limits of Sophia's courage, her loyalty, and the depth of her love. But as Rome slept under its canopy of ancient stars, Sophia drifted into dreams filled with warm amber eyes and a heartbeat that had finally learned to dance to a new, thrilling rhythm. The next morning, Sophia woke with sunlight streaming through her window, and a sense that the world around her had changed in some subtle, wondrous way. For a moment, nestled in her sheets, she wondered if the previous night had been a vivid dream. But the faint tingling memory of that bold kiss still lingered on her lips, and on the nightstand the business card remained, proof that it had been real. Her stomach fluttered as she recalled everything. The danger, Lorenzo swooping in, his lips on hers, the gentle way he'd looked at her afterward, and the promise in his eyes when she agreed to see him again. She pressed the card between her fingers, heart skipping a beat at his name and number. Should I call him? She wondered. He had given her the choice. Now it was up to her to take the next step. All morning, through the routine of brewing coffee and opening the bookshop with her mother, Sophia floated in a pleasant haze. Even her mother noticed her distraction. "You're very smiley today," her mother remarked with a knowing grin, as Sophia arranged a display of novels in the shop window. "Have a good time with your friend last night?" Sophia's cheeks warmed. "It was eventful," she replied coyly. She hadn't mentioned the bar incident. There was no need to worry her mother. But she couldn't keep all the delight from her voice. "I met someone, actually. He helped me out of a tricky situation." Her mother raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her daughter's tone. "Oh, and this someone is why you're glowing like a lantern?" Sophia laughed, fiddling with a book to hide her blush. "Maybe," she lowered her voice. "He was very kind and he asked if he could see me again." Her mother's eyebrows lifted in surprise. It was no secret that Sophia's love life had been pretty quiet. "That's wonderful, Cara," her mother said gently. "I'm glad. You deserve a little happiness with someone nice." A soft smile bloomed on Sophia's face. Under her mother's encouraging gaze, she pulled out her phone. With a deep breath, she sent a short text to the number on Lorenzo's card. "Ciao, Lorenzo. It's Sophia. Thank you again for last night. I'd love to meet you for that coffee if the offer still stands." She hit send before she could overthink it, her heart thumping. His reply came not 10 minutes later. "Ciao, Sophia. I'm delighted to hear from you. The offer absolutely stands. Are you free this evening?" Sophia nearly dropped her phone in her haste to respond. By early afternoon, they had arranged to meet at 7 p.m. at a cafe not far from her neighborhood. The rest of the day seemed to crawl. By late afternoon, Sophia's nerves and excitement were in equal measure. She rushed home early, her mother shooing her out of the shop with an excited wave. Sophia stood before her closet with butterflies dancing in her stomach. First date, she thought, hardly believing it. After much deliberation, she chose a soft ivory sundress with tiny blue flowers that brought out the color of her eyes. She left her dark hair down in loose waves and applied just a touch of makeup, a bit of eyeliner and a rosy tint on her lips. Examining herself in the mirror, she still looked like herself, but perhaps a touch more alive than she had in a long time, as if the joy inside her was shining through. When she stepped out into the early evening, the Roman sun was low and golden, The cafe they'd chosen had outdoor seating facing a small piazza. As Sophia approached, she spotted Lorenzo immediately. Impossible to miss, really, given his height and the quietly confident way he held himself. He was dressed more casually today, a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows and charcoal trousers. He was scanning the street with a slight frown of concentration. The moment Lorenzo saw her, his entire expression changed. The seriousness melted away, replaced by a warm smile that sent Sophia's heart into a flutter. He stepped forward to meet her. "Buonasera, Sophia," he greeted, voice tinged with unmistakable pleasure. His gaze took her in appreciatively. "You look beautiful." "Buonasera," Sophia replied, her voice catching slightly at the compliment. "Thank you. You look very handsome, too." She wasn't sure if it was too forward to say, but it was true. And the way his smile deepened told her he didn't mind at all. They settled at a little table under a striped awning. Flowering geraniums in a window box beside them lent a sweet scent to the air. The bustle of the city felt a world away as they eased into conversation over 2 frothy cappuccinos. Sophia decided coffee in the evening could be forgiven for a day like this. After the initial few moments of admittedly bashful small talk, Sophia found it surprisingly easy to talk to Lorenzo. They discussed her studies. She told him of her plans to maybe pursue a master's in literature, and her work at the bookshop. He was genuinely interested, asking questions that made her feel heard and valued. In turn, he spoke a little more about his own life. He admitted that running his family business involved a lot of responsibility and travel. "My family placed all their hopes on me after my father passed," he said quietly at one point, stirring the foam in his cup. "I do what I must, but it's not always what I want. Sometimes it feels heavy." Sophia could sense that weight in him, an invisible mantle of duty. "For what it's worth, from what I can see, you carry it well," she offered kindly. "You seem like someone who takes care of those around him." Lorenzo looked at her, a flicker of surprise crossing his face, then gratitude. "Grazie, Sophia. That means a lot." He paused, then added with a self-conscious chuckle, "Last night must have made quite an impression, if you think that about me already." She laughed softly. "I suppose it did." A playful glint entered her eye. "Though I haven't decided yet if you're always that impulsive. Kissing strangers in bars and all." He winced dramatically. "I promise I don't make a habit of that. In fact, I'm quite sure that's the first time." Her skepticism must have shown, because he placed a hand to his chest. "On my honor," he insisted, eyes dancing. Sophia giggled, and he smiled at the sound. "Desperate times called for desperate measures," he added more seriously. "But I have no regrets, especially if it earned me the chance to see you today." That turned Sophia's cheeks pink again, and she sipped her coffee to hide a foolish grin. They talked until the sun sank and the streetlights blinked on. The conversation ebbed and flowed effortlessly, from favorite books — they both loved historical novels — to travel. Lorenzo had been to Paris and London. Sophia confessed she'd never left Italy. When he learned that, he said, "We should go sometime, maybe to Florence. I think you'd love it." The casual we in his suggestion made her heart skip. She answered with a soft, maybe, eyes shining. As dusk deepened, Lorenzo finally offered, "Shall we take a walk?" Neither was in a hurry for the evening to end, so Sophia agreed. They strolled through the nearby lanes as the sky turned dusky purple. The conversation lulled into a comfortable silence. Sophia's arm brushed against Lorenzo's occasionally, sending tiny sparks up her spine. She felt simultaneously at ease and thrillingly on edge, the effect of being near someone she was growing fond of, someone who also made her stomach do little flips. In a quiet piazza not far from her home, they paused by an old stone fountain. The warm glow of a street lamp played across Lorenzo's face as he turned to her. Sophia realized her heart was pounding, not from fear or adrenaline this time, but from anticipation. "I had a wonderful time," she said softly, looking up at him through the gentle darkness. "So did I," he replied, his voice equally soft. A hint of something vulnerable crossed his expression. "I've been looking forward to this all day." "Me too," she admitted, her cheeks warming in the night breeze. They stood facing each other, the fountain burbling softly behind them. Lorenzo reached out and, with the lightest touch, brushed a strand of hair away from Sofia's face. His fingers lingered at her cheek, tilting her chin up slightly. "Posso baciarci?" he murmured. "May I kiss you?" Sofia's breath caught. In answer, she closed her eyes and leaned in. A heartbeat later, his lips found hers. This kiss was different from the one they'd shared the night before. It was slow and sweet, carrying the promise of all the days to come, rather than the urgency of the moment. Sofia sighed into it, her hand resting against the cool fabric of his shirt, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath. Lorenzo's hand slipped around her waist, drawing her closer. When they eventually parted, Sofia realized she was smiling. So was Lorenzo. For a moment, they simply held each other's gaze, foreheads almost touching. "I've wanted to do that properly since last night," he confessed, thumb gently stroking her cheek. Sofia bit her lip, happiness swelling in her chest. "I'm glad you did." He chuckled under his breath and pressed a brief, adoring kiss to her forehead. With an arm around her, he began walking her home, though they moved at a glacial pace, prolonging every second together. At the door of her apartment building, they lingered. Sofia's hand rested on his arm. She didn't want to say goodnight, not truly, but she knew they'd see each other again soon. Tomorrow, actually, as they'd already made plans for dinner. Still, there was one thing on her mind. "Lorenzo," she began softly, "I have to ask. Last night, what you did, have you done that kind of thing before? Fighting like that, I mean." She tilted her head, remembering his swift disarming of the drunk. "You seemed experienced." Lorenzo's expression flickered. For a moment she sensed the same guardedness she'd noticed when he spoke of his work. But then he answered frankly, "I've had some training, yes. My father insisted I learn to defend myself from a young age." He gave a faint smile. "Rome can be dangerous, as you unfortunately found out. I'm just glad I was there." Satisfied for now with that answer, Sofia nodded. On an impulse, she rose on tiptoe and kissed his cheek. "My hero," she whispered teasingly, though she meant it. At that, Lorenzo's composure broke into a boyish grin. He opened the building's door for her and waited until she was safely inside the lobby before finally turning to go, casting one last radiant smile back at her. Sofia floated up to her apartment. That night she slept deeply and peacefully, dreaming of a charming man with a warm smile who had stepped out of the shadows to change her life. Over the next few weeks, Sofia and Lorenzo fell into a delightful rhythm. True to his word, Lorenzo took her to dinner the very next day. A romantic meal on a rooftop terrace, with the Colosseum illuminated in the distance. From there bloomed a whirlwind of warm, intimate moments, sharing gelato on an evening stroll, browsing hand in hand through a weekend farmer's market, stealing kisses in the quiet corners of moonlit piazzas. With each date, Sofia felt her walls crumbling. She learned that beneath Lorenzo's polished exterior lay a man with a quick wit and a generous heart. He teased gentle laughs out of her with stories about his childhood, like when he tried to run away at age 10 to join the circus, and impressed her with small kindnesses, like how he'd bring a novel from her favorite author when he picked her up, saying it reminded him of her. Sofia, in turn, opened up about her aspirations and fears. She told him about the scholarship she hoped to get, about the nights she still cried missing her father, about how she sometimes felt guilty wanting her own life when her mother depended on her. Lorenzo listened with a patience and understanding that made her love him a little more each day.
"Yes, love."
It was a quiet blossoming in her heart that she dared not speak aloud yet, but it grew stronger with every look and every touch they shared. Still, not everything was perfect. Sofia couldn't ignore that there were parts of Lorenzo's life he kept veiled. He would get phone calls at odd hours that he stepped aside to answer, face drawn and voice clipped. He often didn't talk much about his work beyond generalities. Once, she casually mentioned hearing on the news about a local business owner's mysterious disappearance. He had tensed and swiftly changed the subject. Sofia tried to push aside the niggling worries. Lorenzo was a good man. She knew that in her soul. Everyone had pressures and secrets, and he had inherited an entire business empire at a young age. That alone could explain it. Then one late afternoon, an incident occurred that Sofia couldn't easily explain away. She decided to surprise Lorenzo at his office with a homemade tiramisu. He'd mentioned it was his favorite dessert. She arrived at the address he'd given her, a nondescript building on a quiet side street. Inside, a security guard seemed to recognize her name and promptly escorted her upstairs. Soon, she was led into Lorenzo's spacious office. Lorenzo stood by a large window, phone in hand. The moment he saw Sophia in the doorway holding the dessert, his eyes widened in surprise and something like alarm. But it vanished quickly as he set the phone down. "Sophia, this is a lovely surprise," he said, crossing the room. Up close, Sophia noticed his posture was tense, and there was a tightness around his eyes. It looked like he'd been in the middle of dealing with something serious. "I'm sorry if I'm interrupting," she said, suddenly unsure. I made tiramisu and thought you might like some." He stared for half a second. Then his face broke into an affectionate smile that eased her worry. "You have no idea how happy I am to see you," he murmured. Taking the glass dish from her hands, he set it on his desk, then cupped her face and kissed her forehead. "You weren't interrupting anything that can't wait," Lorenzo assured. But as he said it, a crash sounded from beyond the closed office doors, followed by raised voices. Lorenzo's body went rigid. Immediately, he moved in front of Sophia, pushing her gently behind him. "Stay here," he said under his breath. Before he could take a step, the office doors burst open. Marco, Lorenzo's ever-present bodyguard, stumbled in, blood seeping from a cut on his forehead. Behind him, in barged a wild-eyed man wielding a gun. Sophia recognized the seething look of vengeance on his face an instant before he snarled, "De Luca!" Her heart plummeted. The man's crazed gaze swung to Sophia and Lorenzo. "You!" he spat at Lorenzo, raising the pistol with a trembling hand. "You ruined my family. Today I ruin yours." Time seemed to slow. Sophia felt Lorenzo tense like a coiled spring. He stepped forward, trying to shield her entirely. In a calm, steady voice he said, "Let's talk about this. Don't do anything you'll regret." "Talk?" The intruder barked, voice cracking. "Did talking bring my brother back? You think money will fix what you did? No, blood for blood." Sophia's blood ran cold. This wasn't random. This man knew Lorenzo, knew something about his world that she didn't. The gunman's focus shifted to Sophia, peeking from behind Lorenzo's shoulder. His lips twisted. "Is this your woman?" he hissed. "Pretty. Perhaps I start with her?" "No." Lorenzo's voice sliced through the air. He moved fully in front of Sophia. "Your quarrel is with me. Leave her out of this." The man's finger tightened on the trigger. "Say goodbye, De Luca." A shot exploded, deafeningly loud in the office. Sophia screamed as Lorenzo jolted in front of her. For an endless second, she didn't understand what had happened. Then she saw the blood spreading across Lorenzo's midsection, staining his crisp shirt red. "Lorenzo!" she cried as he collapsed back into her. Together, they crumpled to the floor behind the desk. Chaos erupted. Marco, injured but not out, launched himself at the gunman with a roar, just as the intruder tried to aim at Sophia. They grappled violently. Another gunshot went off, shattering a vase. Sophia barely registered it. She was on the floor, cradling Lorenzo's head in her lap. He was bleeding, far too much. Shock robbed her of breath. "No, no, no," she pleaded, pressing her hand over the wound, trying to stanch the flow. "Lorenzo, stay with me, please." His face had gone ashen, but he still managed to lift a hand weakly to her cheek. "Sophia," he gasped, eyes full of pain and regret. "I'm sorry." "Don't you dare apologize," Sophia choked, tears blurring her vision. Distantly, she heard shouting, more of Lorenzo's men flooding in to subdue the intruder, but her world narrowed to the man lying in her arms. "You're going to be okay. Help is coming." Footsteps pounded. The office filled with shouting and the metallic scent of blood. Sophia felt strong arms gently pulling her away as medics swarmed in. She realized someone must have called an ambulance. She refused to release Lorenzo's hand even as they lifted him onto a stretcher. His eyes found hers amid the flurry. "Ti amo, Sophia," he whispered, voice barely audible. A sob tore from her throat. "I love you too," she cried, squeezing his hand. "So you have to fight, do you hear me? You fight and stay with me." Lorenzo's eyes glistened. He gave the tiniest nod before his lashes fluttered closed. Sophia rode with him in the ambulance, refusing to let go of his hand even as the paramedics worked frantically to stem the bleeding. Sirens blared. She prayed harder than she'd ever prayed in her life. 2 days later, Lorenzo finally opened his eyes, weak but alive. He awoke in a hospital room, to the sight of Sophia curled in a chair by his bedside, her small hand enveloping his. The moment he stirred, she was at his side, smoothing back his hair, tears of relief spilling down her cheeks. "Ciao, amore," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "You scared me." Lorenzo's eyes, though heavy-lidded and clouded with pain, filled with tender warmth. "You're here," he rasped. "I'm here," Sophia smiled, crying and laughing all at once. She pressed a kiss to his knuckles. "And you're going to be fine." Over the next days, as Lorenzo recovered, the truth unraveled between them in hushed, earnest conversations. He told her everything. How his father had been a powerful figure in the Rome underworld. How Lorenzo inherited not just businesses but a mantle of capo. How he'd tried to shield his family from violence by consolidating power, making alliances, and how it had trapped him in a life he despised. The man who attacked him was seeking revenge for a gang war casualty related to those dealings. With tears in her eyes, Sophia told him about her father's death at the hands of criminals, and how falling in love with Lorenzo had torn her between her principles and her heart. "I never wanted to lie to you," Lorenzo said fervently, his hand clutching hers despite the IV attached to his arm. "From the moment I met you, I wished I were just an ordinary man you could be with freely. I should have told you sooner. I was afraid I'd lose you if you knew who I really was." Sophia brought his scarred hand to her lips. "I won't pretend it doesn't hurt that you kept such a big part of your life hidden, but I understand why you did." Her eyes searched his. "I fell in love with the Lorenzo who makes me feel safe and cherished. That hasn't changed. What I need to know is, can you leave that dangerous world behind?" I will," he vowed. "Even before this happened, I was quietly arranging to step away. Too many people depended on me to just vanish, but now, I don't care. I'll give it all up. There are others who can take over and keep things stable. I want out, Sophia. I want a life of peace with you." Sophia leaned over him, careful of his healing wound, and rested her forehead against his. "Whatever our future holds, we face it together," she whispered. It took time, weeks of careful negotiations and swift decisions, but Lorenzo made good on his promise. He officially stepped down from running the DeLuca network, handing the reins to a trusted associate. What illegal operations existed were shuttered or spun off. The DeLuca interests would focus only on legitimate businesses moving forward. During that period, Sophia stayed by his side. She moved him from the hospital to her mother's home for a while, where they could hide from prying eyes and he could heal in quiet anonymity. Many nights she woke to find him watching her with an expression of wonder, as if he couldn't believe she was still there. Every time she would snuggle against him and reassure him gently, "Sempre, always." One evening, under the soft glow of a lamp in the cozy living room, Lorenzo got down on one knee, still a bit unsteady but determined, and formally proposed. He held out a simple gold ring he'd procured through one of his cousins. "Sophia mi vita," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Will you marry me? I don't have much to offer right now except a heart that is yours completely, and a promise to devote every day to making you happy." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes as she knelt with him, her hands cradling his face. "You are my happiness," she replied. Yes, I'll marry you." They held each other for a long time, both shedding quiet tears of relief and joy. In that embrace, all the darkness they'd endured found its meaning. It had led them to this moment of pure love and commitment. A warm summer breeze rustled through the olive trees as twilight descended over the Tuscan countryside. On the patio of a rustic villa, fairy lights twinkled above a long dining table strewn with half-empty wine glasses, platters of pasta, and the remnants of a lively family feast. Laughter rang out from inside the house where a few children were playing hide-and-seek among the furniture. Sophia stepped away from the laughter, carrying a stack of plates toward the outdoor sink. She paused for a moment to take in the scene. The rolling hills turned purple by dusk, the scent of rosemary and grilled vegetables still hanging in the air, the murmur of beloved voices. Her heart felt full to overflowing. "Amore, let me help with that," came Lorenzo's familiar voice behind her. She turned with a smile as her husband joined her, holding their 3-year-old son Antonio in his arms. The drowsy toddler clung to his father's shoulder, a content little king in the embrace of his favorite hero. "Grazie," Sophia said, handing off the plates to Lorenzo's free hand. He leaned over to kiss her temple, then gently transferred their half-asleep boy into her arms. Not far away, Sophia's mother and Lorenzo's mama were chatting happily, a sight that still amazed Sophia. Their families, once worlds apart, now united and at ease. A few of Lorenzo's cousins were smoking cigars by the rose bushes, and her friend, the very same who'd dragged her out that fateful night, was animatedly showing pictures of her own newborn to one of Lorenzo's aunts. It was 5 years to the day since that fateful night in Rome, and the gathering tonight was both a family reunion and an anniversary celebration. After so much that had happened, life for Sophia and Lorenzo was beautiful and refreshingly normal. They had married a year after the bar incident, in a small sunlit church on the outskirts of Rome. Sophia wore ivory lace and walked down the aisle with tears of joy in her eyes. A locket containing a photo of her father tucked against her heart so he could symbolically be with her. When they exchanged vows, Lorenzo's voice broke saying, "In sickness and in health," and Sophia gently wiped away his tears with her thumb before kissing him to the applause of all present. True to his word, Lorenzo had remade his life. Freed from his illicit ties, he invested in legitimate ventures, opening a second bookshop with Sophia and her mother, starting a vineyard in Tuscany, something he'd always dreamed of. They still kept an apartment in Rome, but much of their time was spent here in the countryside, where the air was clean and the future felt bright. "Someone's falling asleep," Sophia whispered to Antonio, who was indeed dozing off against her shoulder. She rocked him gently, humming a lullaby until his little eyes closed. With a kiss to his chubby cheek, she handed the sleeping boy to her mother, who took him inside to put him to bed. Lorenzo returned from dropping off dishes, slipping an arm around Sophia's waist. Together they wandered a few steps away from the house, drawn by the silver glow of moonlight over the vineyards. Crickets serenaded the night, and a chorus of laughter peaked inside as someone recounted a joke in dialect. Sophia looked up at Lorenzo. Even now, she sometimes felt a pinch-me surge of gratitude that this wonderful, kind man was hers. He turned his head and caught her gaze, raising an eyebrow. "What is it, Bella?" "You've got that look," she grinned. "Just thinking how lucky I am." He laughed softly. "Funny, I was thinking the same thing about myself." They reached the low stone wall at the edge of their property, overlooking neat rows of grapevines that stretched into the distance. Lorenzo stopped and faced her fully, taking her hands in his. Even after years of marriage, he often looked at her like he couldn't quite believe she was real. Sophia adored that about him. "Have I told you today how much I love you?" he murmured, drawing her close. In the moonlight, his eyes were as warm as ever. "Not since lunch," Sophia teased, pretended to pout. "Meraviglia," he sighed theatrically. "Then I'm long overdue." He pressed a tender kiss to her lips. "Ti amo, Sophia, sempre." She smiled against his lips. "Ti amo, Lorenzo, sempre." He rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" she asked, brushing a lock of his hair back. "For taking a chance on an impulsive stranger one crazy night, and for sticking with me even when things got hard." His voice deepened with emotion. "Thank you for this life you've given me." Sophia felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "We gave each other a life," she corrected gently, "and I wouldn't trade it for anything." They swayed together in the silence of the night. Sophia closed her eyes, reveling in the solid warmth of his arms around her, the steady beat of his heart against hers. She thought back to that timid girl she'd been 5 years ago, stepping into a bar she never wanted to go to. How terrified and alive she'd felt in the moment she first kissed this man, not knowing who he was or what it meant, only feeling that inexplicable spark. That night, she had been unaware of his true identity. But it ultimately didn't matter. He had given her his last name, yes. But more importantly, he had given her his heart, his soul, and a love that would last a lifetime. And as Lorenzo dipped his head to kiss her once more under the Tuscan stars, Sophia knew with unwavering certainty that she had found her destiny, in the arms of the man who would treasure her forever.